Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Julian Blake. I'm the Director of Digital Agenda. I'm a journalist and event producer, and my specialist area is Tech for Good. So I'm delighted to be here today and really happy to be here in Reading. And thanks to Louise Clark in particular for inviting me along. I met Louise 3 years ago when I was doing a project mapping the technology startup activity around the UK. And Reading, as many of you probably know, is an area which, is well known for its big tech and its big tech business parks, but it's been less well known for its smaller startup community. And Louise has been really driving that over at Connectivity out at Green Park, where the big wind turbine is. So it's been brilliant to connect and stay in touch with Louise as I've developed this Tech for Good project. So Digital Agenda has been going for a couple of years, and we celebrate the innovations that people are deploying for the benefit of society. And we run a thing called the Impact Awards, which honours the best of Tech for Good, whether that's in apps that help kids to learn more effectively and engage with schools, or to teachers to teach more efficiently and run their systems better, or for doctors to be able to connect with patients more effectively. We've seen a brilliant initiative that's run by a company called Babylon Health called GP at Hand, which has been running for a couple of years now, and that helps you to do a video conference directly with your doctor. So that's the stuff we celebrate, and you don't have to be a non-profit or a charity to do this stuff. Lots of this stuff is being driven by for-profit businesses and also by government agencies. So that's a little bit about Digital Agenda, and I thought I'd give you just a bit of a preamble about what I do, but much more interestingly, you're going to want to hear from our panel. We've got about half an hour, and we're going to hear from 4 brilliant entrepreneurs who are working in their own way to deliver technology for good. So I'd like to welcome them to the stage. Now, first of all, Dan Gipple from Better Points, Carolina Karlstrom from eCode Life. Thank you. Please do sit down. Thank you. Ali Merrifield from Miram. And finally, Michalis Papadakis from Brainomics. Welcome, everybody. Great to be here. Lovely space. And it's really good to see that Reading has such a vibrant and kind of diverse community of tech entrepreneurs, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the area and the space, and perhaps we'll come on to that at the end. But first of all, just one of the things that startups like to do is an elevator pitch. So just to acclimatise and to give you a sense of what everyone's doing, I'd like to give you all no more than 2 minutes. That's 120 seconds to tell us what it is that you do and a little bit about your technology and how it's improving lives. So Dan.
Sure. Hi, everyone. We kind of wear our Tech for Good name on our sleeve with a name called Better Points. Better Points was born here in Reading. We'd actually launched in this building about 5 years ago. But basically, Better Points is a big software platform that we use to create programs in different cities and towns with local councils and the NHS and companies to simply motivate people of how they behave in certain ways. So how do they behave in coming to work? Do they get in their car and drive a single car, or do they actually ride the bus and walk? But we also work with healthcare bodies like the NHS to motivate people in terms of their levels of physical activity. And they are rewarded with what we call Better Points. We've been doing this for about 5 years here in Reading. At one point, we had about over 20,000 people signed up. So far, it's going very well. But in our world, basically, we believe that if people will just change their behavior a little bit, in certain ways, it will have a very, very big impact on certain things that really matter.
Very good. Thank you very much. Carolina.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Carolina Karlstrom, and I'm here representing eCode Life. And eCode Life is an initiative who wants to raise awareness, to educate, and to inspire to action on some of the big challenges that we're facing today as humanity. And I'm talking about climate change and mass extinction. And one of the ways that we do this, one of the tools that we're using is our online game app called eCode. So it's a quiz game that you can play on your phone or on your tablet that will ask you questions around energy, waste, health and well-being, and water to raise awareness and educate. And the game also will give you actions to do, so to inspire people to make changes in their daily behaviors. And we work with schools, we work with businesses and other types of organizations.
Great. Ali.
So I'm Ali. I would love to say I get to work in Africa Tech every day, but I work for a digital agency. We have an office in South Africa, but I did a lot of sort of work with startups in a slightly previous life, but we still do a lot of work with really interesting companies, some big corporates, but also companies looking at wearable devices in the security space, to working with large global charities, to working with social enterprises, and that spans from experience design through to product development, or just sort of digital strategy. So work with a lot of different companies rather than sort of being one of these amazing entrepreneurs myself.
Hi everyone, my name is Michalis Papadakis and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Brainomics. What we do in a nutshell, we are using AI in medical imaging to help with the diagnosis of stroke patients. We started as a spin-out from the University of Oxford, and we have technologies that automate the analysis of brain CT scans of stroke patients. So once the patient has a stroke, with our software we help frontline physicians to diagnose and treat patients faster, even in places where the expertise is not readily available. As I mentioned, we are in Oxford, but we operate globally. We are in 25 countries, and thousands of patients every month are using our system to analyze the brain CT scan so that physicians can treat them faster and better.
Great, all right, thank you. I wanted to start with a general question, which is around the state, I guess, of technology and the view of the world that we have a technology at the world at the moment. We've had the rise of fake news, data privacy scandals, the effects of mental health on our mental health, of too much time on social media, all of those concerns about tech being for bad, if you like. I'd like to ask each of you, you're doing great work within health and sustainability in particular. Why it is that you think technology is a force for good, and how it is that your own work is doing good through technology. And Michalis, let's perhaps pick on you first.
Sure. I mean, we work in a space that we are directly impacting patients' lives. So in terms of the benefits that we can provide, and in general, AI in healthcare, I would say the upside is immense. There are big needs. There are lack of resources in hospitals where they don't have expertise in terms of radiology to diagnose patients beyond stroke, that's for any indication, and patients are missing out from life-saving procedures and treatments. So by providing automated tools that help physicians worldwide to have the same standard of care, it's something that improves outcomes. We know, for example, in stroke in particular, every minute that we save, that adds a week of healthy life to the patient. So every minute that we can save by deploying technologies that enable treatment of patients is something definitely for good.
All right, let's just explore that just slightly with Brainomics and the work, and obviously that critical time that you talked about from the point at which someone has a stroke to it being diagnosed. How does it actually, what's the technology that allows that transmission of the information through to the clinicians so that they can do that? Just keep it, if you just give us a headline kind of description of how that works.
Of course. So currently every patient that has a stroke, once they go to the hospital, they have a brain CT scan to have an image of their brain for the physicians to see the organ they have to decide how to treat. The problem is that stroke is hard to diagnose. The scans that guide the decision-making are very difficult to detect stroke damage. So what we have done is we have automated the detection of stroke on a scan using AI, so physicians that might not have the expertise or the experience, or even if there isn't an expert available, we can enable any hospital anywhere to treat patients as fast and as soon as possible.
Okay, great. Well, and a massive impact, obviously, directly affecting people who are, are stroke victims there. Ali, tell us a little bit about, from your experience, about how technology, your experience is slightly different, I guess, but, technology's application for good.
I just think there's such a spectrum, and you've got some technologies which are literally saving lives, be it on sort of a massive scale or just in certain markets and in certain areas. I also think it's interesting when you scale it back and you look at technology that just makes people's lives better day to day. So if you look at accessibility, and this wasn't possible before some of the technologies we have today, so it's just a really interesting time to solve some of these problems. And if you talk to someone who has visual impairment or is completely blind, getting around their house and getting a taxi and getting from one place to another and getting information was such a challenge. Now they can talk to Alexa, they can find out when the train times are, they can call an Uber and take a picture and get verification that that's their driver. They can find their keys if they lose them, all on apps on this one single device. So I think, technology for good is such a range and a scale, from literally the life-saving applications to things that just make people's lives easier.
Sure.
So I think it's important to sort of recognize that huge scale. It doesn't all have to be these massive things where we're saving lives all the time, which is amazing. But there are some things that can change people's lives in iterations all the time.
Very much so. And your experiences, you've brought a lot of experience from Africa, as you said. For the benefit of those who haven't, experienced life in the African continent, tell us about the kind of the differences, maybe the stuff we take for granted here. Maybe it's around connectivity, or just the availability of technologies, and what challenges that presents to people in terms of trying to develop things that will help improve lives.
Yeah, I mean, accessibility is a huge thing with the internet, and just sitting there. I mean, if you think about, you get everything, on your single device now, and just the cost. So getting satellite TV, plus an internet connection, plus your mobile connection, I mean, that's probably, equal to about £200 a month, where you pay, $20 a month and you have everything through sort of one channel. So think about people who are earning far less, and they're literally spending a third of their sort of weekly wages on airtime just to get access. But when you see someone who's never seen the internet before go online for the first time and figure out they have this world at their fingertips, it's incredible. And I think, but it's not just access to like YouTube videos. And I was living in South Africa when we launched YouTube, for Google in the market. And, it's the different sort of local trends are really interesting and what people sort of want to do. And there's a huge platform for people interested in Nollywood films. Nollywood is the third largest film industry in the world after Hollywood and Bollywood. So these are very, very different sort of interests that we come across. But so there's access to entertainment, but literally access to health information, access to jobs, things that can really help people improve their lives. And there's one story, for example, of an individual who, I don't know if you know Avon, and they sell sort of beauty products, and Avon ladies.
Avon calling.
Yeah, and it's huge still in Brazil and South Africa, and they still in the UK, but it's something that is a large sort of source of income for a lot of women there as well. They were employing women long before women even got the vote. And one woman in South Africa, who was literally sort of living with her 2 kids, could barely feed them, couldn't afford them clothes. And then someone taught her how to use a laptop and how she could optimize her sales, introduced her to Avon, told her how she could sell more, use this to sort of do digital distribution. She's now got her own house and got 2 kids in university that she can pay for. And it literally changes people's lives.
Sure. Okay. Carolina, you're working in the area of sustainability, and the global goals are things that we hear about a lot. These are the 17 biggest challenges that the United Nations has set for the world. Proudly wearing the global goals badge there, I see. Some of this stuff just seems like so insurmountable, doesn't it? When you think about these great global problems, how can technology, and it's a very broad question, but how is the technology that you're working with helping to address global goals?
Absolutely. So I think that what we see a lot is that we read in the newspaper, we see on telly, we see on news, these quite scary pictures sometimes, of devastated places. I mean, just look at in California at the moment, the wildfires. We've had, there's flooding, there is more hurricanes, there is more extreme weather events. There's the plastic in our oceans. There's birds getting caught up in plastic and dies, and the impact all this plastic can have in our oceans. All of this can feel really daunting and horrible, and a lot of people look away, thinking that this is way too much and there's nothing I can do. So the way that we're looking at it at EcoLife is really to make it easy, to make it accessible, and to make it understandable, and to show the individual that yes, you can make a difference, and it really, really matters. Because all of us, if I do it, you do it, you do it, all of you guys do it, then all of a sudden, you know, it's making a greater impact. And so the app that we have is trying to make it more accessible and fun and engaging and inspiring, and also the way that social media can be used in terms of spreading your word and you know, creating action is really quite remarkable.
Okay, so and you mentioned gamification and games as a vehicle for using and raising awareness among people about sustainable and environmental issues as well.
Yeah, indeed, yes. So it's the eCode game is all about understanding and learning more about these big issues, and it really brings you down on a personal and individual level. And I'm also working with something called the SDG network, which is not very techy, but...
What is that? What is SDG?
SDG, so that's the Sustainable Development Goals, the badge that I'm wearing. There's a big project going on at the moment, has been recently launched about making the SDGs and showing how they are applicable to each and every one of us, called the Good Life Goals. Which is really showing that, you know, these goals, there's 17 of them, they range from, you know, poverty to peace and equality and everything in between. And it's really bringing it down to a personal level to see that actually I can do something here, whether it's recycling something or reusing or not buying it or supporting a charity or collaborating for you know, for a good cause with others cross borders. So, yeah.
Okay. Dan, I suppose in some ways your technology is about much more personal, sustainable living, and you know, that behaviour change that you talked about is about individual action rather than necessarily organisations.
Yeah, to a large degree it is. And you know, this whole thing, and Ali was bringing it up, and there's so many levels to this Tech for Good. For example, our organization, Better Points, we don't have a central office. Everybody works in different areas of the country, and it's only because of the newly developed applications that we can use that we can successfully run a company actually quite effectively. And people vary their hours, they sometimes vary their days, and it's a whole new way of operating that's extremely effective. And if you think about it, you know, how many car journeys are saved just by our company every year from just doing that? That's a very simple thing. Our software system, we use it at the front end, a GPS, what you call the GPS tracking and messaging app. And one of the best things about this is wherever you are, if you have the app on, it will track what you're doing, but we can track what travel mode, whether you're cycling, walking, riding a bus. It can also track, you know, how fast you're going, the amount of calories you're burning, the amount of CO2 you are. But the key thing about this is that's all wonderful. Is the way the systems are going is these individual apps and systems will eventually progressively learn about who an individual is, where they are at in terms of their health or their travel or their life circumstance, and it will start to respond in ways that is really very, very personal, in ways that benefit that person but also benefit society. And it's a concept called machine learning, and it's something we're progressively working. It's a hot phrase, machine learning, but all it really means is the system learns about the person, the individual, and their needs and responds. That makes it more sticky, it makes a person more engaged, and it just makes the whole thing more effective. Now there's a dual edge to that, of course, is as you're collecting what they call this small data of individuals, what are you going to do with that? And I'm sure you've all heard the things of people marketing data and selling data on people. Well, in our company, we don't do that. We'll never do that. And for the main reason is you could have a group of inactive people and say, okay, well, we need to work with them. But the key thing you have to watch is the machines learn about people and what they do. You have, at the same time, have to provide protections of that data is being used in the right way.
Yeah, I mean, and this goes back to the point that I was making, I guess, in the introduction. A lot of this concern around Cambridge Analytica, for instance, which was the company that was found to have been mis-selling data and disrupting the democratic process. Is it, you know, a slight question about this. I'm gratified to hear that you anonymize the data that you collect. Do you sometimes, people come back and sometimes worry that, there's a slightly big brother-ish element to what you're doing, even though it has a sort of, a for-good element to it.
No, when people, I mean, this is one of the things that, when you join a Better Points program, when you join, it makes it quite clear that their data is never going to be used or exposed to anybody. And when we work with clients, we have very strict data sharing agreements. And it's something that we protect very, very closely. And that's not our purpose. Our purpose is not a commercial model. Tim Cook of Apple came out very strong on this, that he was never going to commercialize individual data. And we're completely with that position, that you can do great good without doing that. You don't have to market people's data. You can, as long as you have the permission of that person and they're happy for you to do this. But when you're dealing with somebody's health and how they actually behave in their daily life, well, that's pretty up close and personal stuff.
Yes, it is.
So that's something that we do not believe really should be commercialized.
Yes. So it's the amalgamation, and this is maybe others want to come in on the value of this kind of big data, if you like, for social benefit, where you've kind of got stuff which is being collected anonymously, which can learn through machine learning of individual behaviors, but also can understand how societies are changing.
Can I
as
have
well.
one final point before we pass on? That we run a program in Bologna, Italy, where we actually collect every day lots and lots of data on people, how they cycle, how they walk, how they travel. Well, that data, completely anonymous, is extraordinarily useful to city planners, because they can tell at what time of day, who's cycling in which direction down which road. When we also do things like track air quality. So how, you can actually start planning and make ancient streets in a city a lot more effective just because you've got that massive data.
Sure. I mean, everyone here, I guess, has got a smartphone in their pocket. Are you happy? Hands up if you're not happy for your data to be used for the wider social good. Everybody's very happy for their stuff because of course your data is being collected a lot of the time. So on that point about data.
Yeah, so I would like to add a couple of points on that. There is no question that data is the new oil. It's the most important sort of asset that we are collecting, that we are using, and we are feeding our technologies with the data that we are collecting. And in our case, it's very sensitive because we are collecting patient data, and there is an even higher level of scrutiny of how we handle this type of data. And of course, we have procedures, we are regulated, and you need the regulators to put some measures in place. But at the same time, because data is the key driver to developing these technologies, it shouldn't be a hindrance because of the fear that you might have by abusing this type of data. So the point I would like to make is that because data is so essential, it is also very important to appreciate the quality of data you are collecting, because you can collect a lot of data and there is a big hype about big data and how big data feeds into AI. But if you don't collect the appropriate data and you don't curate them, the output of what you're going to develop is not going to be reliable. So yes, there are risks. Yes, it's important to make sure you're collecting the appropriate data, but ultimately the benefits you get with the technology you're developing massively outweigh the risks.
Ali, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you asked, was everyone happy to use their data for good? I think the question is, well, how do I experience that good? What am I getting out of it? And, if you look in places like Estonia, who granted have sort of, almost started from scratch and have an amazing data backbone and that integration of data. So, it means that every service is sort of catered for, and you register with a doctor, and then you might buy a house, and so and then you might get pregnant, and but the system knows that, so they'll come to you and go, well, do you want to update your life insurance, or do you want to register for prenatal classes, and 5 years later do you want to put your child in school? And it's sort of proactive because the data is there, and so that then is like doing good because it's serving the whole of society. But that's incredible sort of integration of all those different data sources, and so that's a really interesting example of sort of how they've managed that and to integrate that all and to serve the community. So exactly, this is doing me good because I'm getting all this stuff for me. But I think to the point about good data is, if you look at AI, it is relying on the data. Bad data means bad AI, and I think everything, any kind of technology as a force for good can also be a force for bad. And I think this is where the tech ecosystem comes in. And the important thing is that will happen. It does everywhere. But to encourage the people doing good stuff with AI or any technology, and promote that and make that the example and the opportunity. And the media have a part to play in that, government has a part to play in that, the private sector has a part to play in that, the social sector has a part to play in that, because you're not going to avoid the bad stuff, but in order to kind of encourage the good stuff, and let's make that the example and that the kind of the ambition for people. But I think it's the same. Bad data in, bad AI out, good data in, good stuff out.
Do you agree with that, Caroline?
Yes, I do. I was just thinking of, and linking to what you talked about before the break, when you talked about blockchain and that technology and the data that you can get from that. And very much relating to raising awareness and realizing that you can have an impact is this ice cream manufacturer, Ben & Jerry's actually, who are working with implementing this. But when you go and buy this Ben & Jerry's ice cream, you can also then see on some app or something, I think, what the carbon footprint is of that ice cream. And then you can pay for that. So, the ice cream costs, I don't know, 2-3 quid or whatever. And then you pay a little bit more to actually, for the carbon footprint of that ice cream. So it's really looking into, I'm having an impact on nature here by buying this ice cream. And I'm making sure that I'm paying for it so that we don't destroy the world, in terms of climate change and all those things.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. Well, let's talk about impact. That's a word that's used a lot when we talk around tech for good. It's kind of, how do you understand what's good in the world? Is whether it's having an impact on people, on places, and on society. I'd like to just ask each of you, and anyone can pick up on this, is how is the stuff that you're doing, with kind of obvious examples, you look at, as your ventures as a whole, how are they, and what sort of impact are you able to demonstrate in what you do?
I mean, in our case, it is a very sort of even shocking statistic that every 30 minutes, a stroke patient that could be independent and alive dies or remains permanently disabled because they don't get the right treatment. And that is at the patient level. Any patient that we enable getting treatment through our technology has a life-changing impact to the patient themselves. But we also know, even for the society and the healthcare system, that every patient that receives treatment, there is a net saving of £80,000 per patient. So there is a socio-economic benefit by enabling, using technologies, more patients having access to life-saving treatments.
I think you probably have far more on the sort of direct impact of your initiatives. I would just say, I guess, in the same way that I was talking about that scale of, you can have stuff that saves lives and stuff that helps people day to day. I think impact is the same. The one thing I would say is just that to look at the whole impact and absolutely everything. So, for example, just taking up the ice cream, there was a lot said about, well, you can't buy flowers from Kenya because they're flown here, and so the, massive impact on climate change. But if you look at the whole picture, you're like, well, they're in greenhouses in sort of Holland, and but actually in Kenya, they're done by farmers, and those farmers are each supporting sort of 20 people, and so the development impact is sort of far greater. It's not just about the petrol used on a plane or the fuel. So I think all I'd say is an impact. It's looking at the entire impact. 'Cause it's not always as simple as, oh, well, there's some fuel being used to fly them, because there's a whole different picture that's happening, which is just larger than that sort of one piece. So I think impact has to take everything into it, and just making sure you're seeing the whole picture.
Yeah. Okay, Caroline.
Yeah, I'm going to bring it to the behavioural change aspect very much, because so not long ago there was a report that came out by the International Panel on Climate Change, IPCC report, which you may or may not have heard about, but it really highlighted that individuals can and really should take action and change the things that we all do in our daily behaviours. Little habits that we have that we might not really be thinking about, we're just doing it because we're doing it. So it's really to think about how you're doing things, why you're buying something, do I have to buy this, where does it come from, how is it produced, and can I reuse this, can I recycle it, etc., etc. And I think what we're doing with the app in a simple way is just to raise awareness of those issues. We've run workshops with universities, have had students coming in saying, well, this is climate change, I'm not a scientist, it doesn't affect me. And at the end of the workshop, they say, well, actually, hey, this is really important, and I can think about how I work with behavioral change in my area.
Dan, I guess with Better Points, you're busy quantifying people's behaviour a lot, and you can demonstrate difference and individual impact quite easily.
Well, that's what we try to do, and I think the point just made Carolina here about awareness. The first part of a behavior change process is really becoming aware of a situation, and then realizing that you actually have a personal role in that situation. And those are the first two steps in our behavior change approach, and I'm sure it is in yours. It is the beginning of it. Let's just take an example, physical inactivity. The world's changed in the last 20 years, and frankly, a lot of it's due to tech. You know, a lot of you out there are from the iPhone generation, what they call the iGen generation, and you're the first generation that grew up with smartphones. Well, the way that people behave today and how much time they spend sitting down, how much time they spend in front of a screen, how they relate to each other, how isolated each other, well, there's been benefits to a lot of that, but the reality is that people are more inactive. In the last 20 years, it's shot up. Today, in the UK, the official statistics, 60% of women and 68% of men, and a third of people, of kids, teenagers leaving year 6, are actually well below the UK public health and physical activity guidelines. And you say, well, does that really matter that much? Well, if you go down the road, let's say you go down the road 30, 40 years, that means you have about a 30% higher chance of getting diabetes, of dementia, of having a stroke, of having cancer. The long-term health to you as an individual is enormous. The other issue, though, is when you look at the cost on the system. So somebody today who's physically active over 150 minutes a week, if we can help motivate that person and that person, they're actually going to live longer with less chronic conditions, and they're going to save the health system probably several £100,000 as they go down the road.
Okay, so there's a social benefit, there's an economic benefit. I'm just going to jump in there. We've got 3 minutes left. I'm just going to leave you all with kind of one broad question, which is really just looking to the future. When we got 3 minutes, so we're going to give you 30 seconds each. Just what's the technology that you're seeing out there right now that's emerging, that you're most excited about, that's going to have the biggest social impact?
I would say, which is very relevant to our field, how we can see AI developing personalized medicine, integrating all the data from genomics to imaging to biochemical data and giving personalized medicines and prescription for a patient irrespective of the indication. So automating and improving the standard of healthcare.
Okay. Sorry, I feel I put you on the spot here. But,
yeah, I actually think still just mobile devices have a long way to go and a whole lot that can still be done. You know, that's just in the power of your hand, and whether it's sort of apps or just simple SMS and the things you can do has a long way to go. If you wanted me to do a new tech, which isn't really new, I'd probably say actually think VR is going to be really interesting, whether it's treatment of mental health or, preparing kids for different experiences. I think there's a lot that we'll sort of see coming out of that, which may not be at mass scale, but I think we'll still have some interesting applications.
Yeah.
I'm not sure this is the technology, but I want to mention it anyway. I want to mention circular economy just because of the fact that
So just to say,
yes,
what do you mean by circular economy for those who don't know?
Yeah, so if you have a mobile phone, for example, and you buy it and you use it for, I think the average time is like 6 months now before people upgrade, 6 to 8 months or something crazy like that. And you actually, you might just rent it from, Apple or whoever. Then you send it back when you're finished with it, and they can take it apart. They can use all those interesting material that's in there, which might be rare earth materials or other types of materials, and they use them again in another phone or somewhere else, rather than just chucking it in landfill. So it's not really quite technology, but applying the circular economy to all this, everything that we do in life, I think is really exciting.
Yes. Okay. All right, Dan.
I'll bring up something we haven't even talked about yet, which is the rise of robotics in society. And I think for many of you out there still in school, I think you're going to face a very, very different, but frankly, a very, very exciting environment where the work roles that we have, the ways we can contribute to economy, the way automation and artificial intelligence we can actually interface and work with to do things in a more productive, more effective way. I think that is going to be an absolutely enormous thing that really has not even, well, it's hitting us. I don't think it's really arrived on our consciousness the way I think it's going to.
Great. All right. Well, listen, the clock on the stage has literally just hit 0, so I guess that means we're out of time. I'd like you all just to put your hands together for our brilliant panel, Michalis, Ali, Tek, and Dan. Thank you very much.